Hello people, thank you so much for dropping by my YouTube channel. Are you someone who's fascinated by stories? Do you love getting lost in someone else's imaginary world? If yes, do listen to this short fictional piece written and narrated by me. I truly hope you enjoy it. Sheila ran onto the sidewalk and stood under the awning of an electrical repairs shop, wondering why the rain had only begun to pour when she had closed her little bakery and was looking forward to the stroll down the lane. "Hey, you want a ride?" came a voice from a car window that had pulled up beside her. She continued to walk, without looking at the person in the claret-colored Ford. This was Gurgaon, and no one just took rides from strangers, however polite they sounded. Vikrant looked out the window, wondering why he kept on trying to offer the ride to this lady who was clearly not interested. "Hey," he tried again. "It seems like there's going to be a bad storm soon." He called over with his sentence trailing off amidst a loud roar. He could barely see her face, so it wasn't like he was interested in her. He just felt sorry for her, seeing as she was huddled up on the sidewalk. Drenched and shivering and with no public transport plying that route, he didn't see a way for her to make it to her home. At that moment, the sky gave a terrifying thunderclap and there were at least 3 accompanying bolts of lightning. She looked up, partly shocked, partly in despair, and with no clear thoughts, began to run towards the car, making it in a few seconds. When she got in, Vikrant stared at her and was instantly taken aback by her looks. The woman had the most interesting facial bone structure. Her full lips and dark, deep-set eyes caught his attention instantaneously. "Thank you so much," she said breathlessly. "I was really hesitant to take your offer because, this is the notorious Gurgaon," she continued with a slight chuckle, followed by a deep breath. Vikrant grunted in response. "Come on, I totally understand. You were just trying to keep safe." She nodded and kept silent for only a few seconds. "I'm Sheila. What's your name?" "Vikrant," he replied. "So where do you live?" "Very much in Gurgaon," she responded. She had a way of studying people. "You don't have to take me to my home. You could drop me to the Crestwood Towers and I'll take an Uber. I wouldn't want you to go out of your way." As she said each sentence, she carefully looked for any non-verbal cues she could pick on. "That's okay. Where do you live?" He repeated the question with no definite emphasis. "I live out in Phase 7. "Really? I do too." She turned. "For real? Where?" "Skyline City." "That's a few meters from where I live," she replied, "across at 360 East. Vikrant nodded, slightly anxious from the proximity of such a beautiful girl. "You're shivering," he observed in alarm. She didn't respond. Instead, she wrapped her arms around herself. He turned up the heat in the car. "Thanks, Vikrant," she said with a small voice. "That's fine," he responded. The eyes, the voice, the vibe, the imagined smile, or the messy hair that seemed to have been tied into a bun. He couldn't pinpoint what captivated him. Meddling with the radio, he unexpectedly threw a question. "Do you know what I do when I'm cold?" She smiled ruefully, expecting him to make a sexual joke. It was to be anticipated, the small prize of enduring some annoying flirting in exchange for a ride home. "What do you do when you're cold?" "I stare into a candle," he said and turned off the heater. Raising her eyebrows, she looked over at him. "You what?" "I stare into a candle." "And that's supposed to do what for you?" "Okay, let me explain." She chuckled. "Yes, please do." "Well, it has to be a scented candle, first of all," he began. His eyes turned radiant. "So what I do is I stare into it when I'm cold." She smirked at his absurdity. Absurd, for she had never come across anyone say this. With a half smile, she said, "You remind me of those Akbar Birbal folk tales. It helps me. It also works if I've got an internal chill or a common cold." He continued his explanation, not giving her time to react. "You must try too. You stare at the flame, inhale the scent, and slowly you feel your body start to warm up from the inside." "That's kind of cool," said Sheila in a quiet voice. Vikrant laughed. "It's very cool, actually. Would you like to try it out?" "How?" she asked. "Have you got a candle in here?" "There should be a couple in the dashboard," he replied, "and a lighter." "But who lights a candle in a car?" she giggled. "It's a miniature one. Also, since I'm not alone and you'll be watching over it, it'll be safe," he said with slightly more emphasis on alone and safe. She reached in and selected the pleasant apple orchid fragrance and lit it. She then began to stare into the flame. As Vikrant cast a glance, he was struck by the sheer prettiness of her, as was lit up by the flame. "You look beautiful." Without taking her eyes off, she blushed lightly. "Thanks." She stared for a little longer. "Oh my, it works. That's crazy." Vikrant nodded. He wanted to buy this woman all the candles in the world if it meant seeing the pure delight on her face every day. Months later, Vikrant was at the quaint cafeteria, the preferred destination for couples. The walls of the eatery had seen it all between different pairs. From casual flirting to eye conversations to heated arguments, it stood non-judgingly for decades. Faces changed, the inner emotions seldom did. He heard her voice before he saw her as he sat with his back facing the doorway. She was hurriedly completing a call. Her clear silvery voice rang through the air confidently, and Vikrant felt his tense muscles subconsciously relax. Much like the way the candles worked magic on him before she came into his life. Vikrant sensed her drawing closer and closer to where he was seated. He didn't turn back, but he knew because she always smelled like an oddly attractive combination of cigarette smoke and whatever fruity body spray she was wearing at the moment. And candles. Always, because the scented candles that he had gifted her burned so often in her house that the scent settled on all her clothes. The sickly sweet scent enveloped him as she bent and hugged him from behind, leaning down to kiss the top of his head. "My baby, I can tell you've had a rough day," she murmured, still holding him from behind. For the few seconds that they stayed that way, it seemed to Vikrant that all his problems were trivial and insignificant. His cares melted away. The heaviness he constantly wore like a garment was replaced by the love of the woman who was wrapped around him, just murmuring sweet nothings in his ear and bringing one very big patch of sweetness into an otherwise tough life. She straightened herself and went to sit opposite him, a big silly smile stretched across her face just for him, as Vikrant drank in the sight of her yellow dress, light curls, and flawless ivory skin. He forgot to breathe for 2 seconds. Candles did bring lovebirds together, lighting up the tables in between them and wiping out the darkness from inside. For the first time, he saw the charm of the wax manifest over bonding of two strangers. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. What do you think happens next between Sheila and Vikrant? Do they get serious enough to commit into a relationship? Drop your thoughts below and do share in the comments how you found this piece. If you liked listening to this story, do like this video and subscribe to this channel for many more such stories that are coming soon. Thank you so much for all your support.